What's up, my wizards? It's Dev from the place with the decks. We got one here, Black-White Control, something that I've been talking about for a while, and so has everyone in the comments. A lot of people stoked on this. Think it's a good deck, and so do I. I've been playing with it for a little while now, and I've got something interesting going on with it. Let's check it out. What's the really good thing we've got going on with it? Well, this deck does not play any creatures at all. The only control deck in the format right now that plays absolutely zero creatures no matter what. You know, even the blue-white control deck that plays no creatures. We'll still play Halimar Tidecaller. We don't play any of that. We don't play a mess. So what are we going to do instead? Well, instead we're going to play 29 spells and 5 Planeswalkers, which are still spells. 29 other spells, mostly removal, some disruption. The disruption comes in the form of 3 copies of Duress. Let's go ahead and kick it off here. We need Duress because, ironically, we're bad against control. Like, against control decks that pack counterspells, we are in trouble, you know. We try to remove their, win condition. They're going to counter it. Many things that they do that we don't want them to do, we have answers for, Once things get on the board, we have plenty of answers. Whether or not they let us do those things is another story. Long story short, we need Duress to get those counterspells out of their freaking hands. The one thing we really don't want to deal with is permission spells. We don't want to do it, so get them out of their hand. Here's some removal for the early game. 2 copies of Reave Soul and 1 copy of Ultimate Price. Reave Soul has really come into its own here in this format. It's getting, a little relevance, it sees some play in Standard, and I can see why. I mean, I've liked this card for a while now, especially, playing it in Sealed and Draft and stuff. It's a powerhouse, We're, in this deck, we're really not doing much else with our second turn anyway, so there's no reason not to destroy, their 1-drop or their 2-drop if we're on the draw, Most of the time we want to destroy their 2 or 3-drop with this, Works all the way until the 3rd, sometimes even 4th turn against some of the things in the format. There's plenty of important things that we can kill with this, including like all the Planeswalkers that people are playing that flip into Planeswalkers from creatures, obviously Jace, Nissa. Some people play Liliana still, So this gets rid of all of them and a host of other creatures in aggro, from Tarka Red and all those decks, green-white megamorphs, So yeah, Reave Soul is actually like really good, especially considering we don't have any 2-drops, This is our 2-drop. And Ultimate Price, everyone expected, me included, for this card to be like really bad, and it did get worse when Battle for Zendikar came out, but it's still main deckable considering green-white megamorph and Atarka are the 2 big aggro decks in the format right now. And green-white megamorphs isn't even full-on aggro, And this even kills stuff in Jeskai, Jace and Soulfire Grandmaster included, so Dragon Master Outcast, the decks play that. So the card is still very relevant, it turns out, and we're going to play at least the 1-of. I'm just going to go down the curve here. 2 copies of Mastery of the Unseen, one of our win conditions in the deck. Yeah, it actually works a lot better than you might think. This comes down a little bit later in the game, depending on what we're playing against. We might want to play it early game against Control. This is very good in the Control matchup, Again, it sucks to have our spells countered, but they can't counter Manifest, and we can play this under the radar, hopefully under Clash of Wills on turn 2. Works out well against a surprising amount of decks. Pretty versatile. Here's some 3-mana removal. 4 copies of Stasis Snare and 4 copies of Ruinous Path over here. Ruinous Path, obviously one of the best cards in the format. I mean, it's weird because everyone was like, this is terrible compared to Hero's Downfall. It is. It's pretty bad. But we need it for an express purpose in this deck. Not just because it's amazing creature removal, but we are in some cases counting on the Awaken there. We have plenty of ways to win, but Awaken Lands is one of those ways, and we've got more than just this card that makes Awaken Lands. And obviously Stasis Snare. It's good to have an instant speed, flash option against all the creatures in the entire format, pretty much, except for, Ojutai. But when he swings in, we, nail him with Stasis Snare. So Stasis Snare just incredibly, fantastically good. I'll pause from the removal train for a second to hop on the advantage train. We're playing 2 copies of Read the Bones. The only actual card advantage generating thing in the deck really for us, but we need it. Read the Bones is very important. Control decks need something like this, Fish, dig, draw some cards. We don't have dig 3 times, we don't have Treasure Cruise, we don't have Chase, so we've got to have some option. I think Read the Bones is probably the best thing in the format for that right now. Back on the removal train, 2 copies of Utter End right here, just ridiculously good. I don't have to go into it too much, because Hangerback Walker, Planeswalkers, Artifacts, Enchantments, Creatures at instant speed is just super dope, and we're playing 2 Utter End. Mass removal, 2 copies of Languish and 2 copies of Planar Outburst. Mostly a removal-based deck if you haven't guessed yet. Languish we need against, you know, obviously super heavy aggro decks in the format, and is just good, right? So I don't have to explain this too much. But then the Awaken cost is pretty interesting. Over here on Planar Outburst, we need that in the super-duper late game, and it does win games for you. You know, Awaken is just one of the ways to win the game, but between Ruinous Path and this, there are plenty of ways in the deck to Awaken lands. So, yes, to all of it. 1 copy of Murderous Cut. I'm pretty sure we're done with... No, we've got 1 more removal card, actually. 1 copy of Murderous Cut, and I could actually see more. I mean, we've just got a ton of instants and sorceries and stuff like that in the deck that hit our graveyard once we play them. So Murderous Cut is fantastic, and you always have the delve for it. I've never had a problem getting the delve for it. And especially in the mid to late-ish game, you know, pretty easy to just play this for 1 or 2. I get to talk about not removal. 1 copy of Dark Petition in the deck, you know, obviously it's a control deck. You see a lot of 1s and 2s in the deck, you know. That's because control decks like to have removal options, or really options, period, over a spread of mana cost, you know. So instead of a bunch of consistent 4-ofs in a control deck, you'll usually see, you know, these are the things that remove things in the 2 slot, the 3 slot, the 4 slot, you know, and so you'll have less of them overall. Now, this deck is no different, and Dark Petition helps you go get whatever you need at the time, sort of making this toolboxy, but I don't think we need more copies of this. And I considered playing Sidisi, but she, like, always exploits herself if she's not exploiting a token from a Planeswalker, which does happen. But Sidisi, I liked, but not enough, you know. I think I'd rather play Dark Petition to help us play the spell that we just tutored for. Here's something else. 2 copies of Secure the Waste, which I would say is not removal, but it plays as removal some of the time, you know. You'll swing in, you'll do a huge Secure the Waste, and just block, 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 you know. Have a couple of guys left over some of the time, so. Especially late game, Secure the Waste is really, really good, you know. You can use this as a win condition. This is instant speed, that's freaking nuts. So, this is the best version of this kind of card that there could possibly be. And I'm not really sure why more people don't play it in some things, you know. It's becoming a thing in some blue-white control decks. I've seen it in a couple of Esper control decks, so maybe it's just good in this format and it wasn't as good in the last format. You know, this format we still have things like Virulent Plague, Boiling Earth, and blah, blah, blah. I could go on about this, but I really like Secure the Wastes, and it's a fine win condition, and it's a fine surprise I can block removal spell, too. To leave a couple of guys over is nice as well. More removal. 1 copy of Quarantine Field to round out the spells here. Quarantine Field is just awesome. You know, it can hit any permanent. That's always desirable. We have a lot of things in here that can hit a lot of different kinds of permanents. You know what I mean? We've got, obviously, Ruinous Path can hit 2 different kinds. Utter End can hit anything. This can hit anything. So we're surprisingly versatile against a lot of the decks in the format. The problem is that we have to let things hit the board first. And so, like, you know, the battlefield effects take place, you know, and that can sometimes be a headache. And we can't just deny them the opportunity to even play to let the spell resolve. You know, that's not on the board for us. So, but that being said, once things do hit the board, we have a litany of options to deal with them. And Quarantine Field for 2 permanents at 6 mana is like great. That's actually really, really good. Parity with Oblivion Ring is fine. So Quarantine Field has been nothing but nuts for me, at least. Here's our trio of Planeswalkers here. 2 copies of Gideon, 1 copy of Sorin, and 2 copies of Ob Nixilis. These are our major win conditions in the deck. You know, we can make creatures with Sorin, we can make creatures with Gideon, and he himself can become a creature. And of course, we can win off of Ob Nixilis' ultimate, but mostly he's going to blow stuff away and draw us cards, you know. So, but we can win off of his ultimate, especially since we're going to be grinding the game out a lot of the time. And this puts them on a pretty interesting clock, you know. 4 damage every turn cycle is... That's pretty good. So, not bad at all, you know, and obviously the majority of our wins will come off of Gideon or even Sorin. And Sorin's +1 is not bad. Once you've got a couple of walkers out, you know, a few 2/2s, you know, not terrible in any way. Helps us regain some of the life we may have lost earlier in the game. And we've got a couple of things that do that and a couple more in the sideboard. We really need that in this deck. And Sorin's very important for that. Gideon is obviously a house, and I don't have to explain Ob Nixilis any more than I already have. I'd like to say more about these Planeswalkers. All I can say is that they win the game for you, you know. And we've got other ways to win the game. Master the Unseen, you know. Person lands are playing Shambling Vent, and obviously we've got Awaken lands. So there's other ways to win, but 90% of your wins are going to come from these dudes. 26 lands in the deck. We make plenty of both black and white. I think it's something like 19 black and 18 white that we make, you know. That's really good. Plus, you know, Shambling Vents is also going to win us some games and help us gain some life back in the mid-game. So, Shambling Vents is an all-star. And here's our sideboard. We've got some stuff against control, we've got some stuff against aggro. Against mid-range, we have, like, fantastic game. Although, we don't, like, love Siege Rhino, you know. Again, we have to let things hit the board. But we have some pretty fair game against mid-range, you know. We're just going to destroy all of their threats, you know. And here's our power rankings. A final score of 64, very much a traditional control deck, you know. It does the things it does well, very well. It does the things that it doesn't care about super poorly, you know. It's not fast, has few win conditions, not very synergetic, it just plays really good cards, you know. So it has like little to no offense, just wants to grind out and win. You know, I keep saying grind out, that's how you win with the deck. You know, drop a Planeswalker in the mid to late game and just make it happen, Captain. Or, you know, Master of the Unseen can do the same thing for you. Awaken Lands can do the same thing. It's just super grindy. But we've got plenty of tools to cover the early all the way to the mid game. And you know, it looks as though the deck is super expensive, but compared to some of the stuff we've done on the channel recently, the deck is not that bad for a standard deck. Obviously, Gideon looks like an expensive card, Ob Nixilis looks like an expensive card, and they sort of are. But once you get over those humps, it's not like we're playing just this ridiculous land base of fetches and battle lands, you know. We're not playing Jace, which really cuts down on the cost all the time. We're not playing like Hangerback Walkers, 15 bucks, you know. So I know Gideon is still pretty expensive. Ob Nixilis is at least reasonable. So the deck is not that bad overall to build. I think it's like $250, something like that. So you can build this for a lot less than your standard deck. It sounds weird coming out. Well, that's all I got for now. Let me know how you feel about this one. I know it's weird, no creatures is strange, but that's how a lot of traditional control decks play, and I think that we can do we can pay homage to control by not playing any counterspells, but ironically not playing any creatures to make up for that lack, you know. Very few threats, but we do very well in the long game here. What are we doing next time? Well, 5-color Bring to Light has been sort of established in the format, had a really good showing at States, and I've been working on 5-color Zoo for quite some time now, like 3 weeks or a month, something like that. I've lost track of time on that deck. I've been working on it for a really long time. But the deck is good, and I'm glad to see that the deck has made a good showing, at least. One more thing, if you enjoyed the content, I know it's this part of the video that everybody clicks off, don't click off. If you enjoyed the content, just press thumbs up. There's a little thumbs up button down there that makes me really happy when you press it. I've seen a lot more people pressing it lately. That makes me cry, in a good way. So, in any case, I've appreciated all your help lately. Like, share, comment, and of course, subscribe if you haven't done that yet. We're almost there, guys. 10,000 subscribers will be a milestone for me, and it's still unbelievable. So, yeah, I'm Dev, if you've been wondering what my name is. If you've been wondering what her name is, that's Julie over there. Hey, Julie. And we will see you guys next time. Thanks for watching, my wizards. Here's our trio of wardens. What?